I want to mention real quick that Arch Manning countered Grandpa. I don't know if you saw this, but remember Archie was like 2 years minimum. He's not draft next year, not going to happen. And Arch was like, I talked to my grandfather. He apologized for making that comment. So this kind of makes as the season goes along and teams are bad, it kind of does add a lot more intrigue if that is not a given that he's going to be in the draft, say 2 or 3 years from now, might be next year.
Well, yeah, sure. But it also is supposed to be a much better quarterback draft in 2026 in general. I mean, you got the Clemson kid, Kubnik, if that's how you pronounce his name. And there are other, Drew Aller, Penn State, Garrett Nussmeier at LSU. There are a bunch of QBs. And, it could be another situation like we saw in 24 where, oh my gosh, you've got Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, Bo Nix, JJ McCarthy, everybody's coming off the board really, really quickly. Michael Penix, also another one of those guys. So I think there is the possibility that happens again in 26, irrespective of whether or not Arch comes off, Arch decides to come out of Texas or not. But I mean, if you are Arch Manning, and you think you're going to be really good and you're going to play for Texas this year, and you don't necessarily know who's going to be really bad in the NFL, and there are teams that have 2 first-round picks like the Browns, which doesn't sound so great, but also the Los Angeles Rams have 2 first-round picks. They can, in theory, move up, go and get you. I think that makes it more intriguing to just keep your options open. Why close that door? You don't know what's going to happen. Right, Matt Leinart, if he had come out of the draft a year earlier than he decided to, probably would have been a number 1 overall pick. Instead, he went to the Arizona Cardinals, and basically nobody ever heard of him until he reemerged on Fox years later after his NFL career. So that's why I think it makes a lot of sense to just keep your options open, and that's I think Arch Manning makes all the sense in the world when he says, "Yeah, I talked to my grandpa and he apologized for that."
Let's go to the Colts here, different quarterbacks, and it was announced that Daniel Jones would be the starting quarterback week 1. Why are so many people so shocked about this and kind of acting like it's the end of the world and the end of Anthony Richardson's career?
Well, the problem with Anthony Richardson right now is that you're going into year 3, and year 3 is extraordinarily determinative in the NFL, in large part because you have to decide, the team has to decide whether or not they're going to exercise your 5th-year option, which then is going to guarantee you that 5th-year salary right after they basically have to do it after the season. They do it in the spring, right? So if you're not going to be a starter in your 3rd year, there's no reason in the world to think that you're going to get paid as a quarterback, going into year 4, right? Or year 5, whatever it is. So that's partially why it's kind of like, all right, well, they tried this for 2+ years and it's not working with Anthony Richardson. And, it's not, well, guess that's it completely, but it is, because unless Daniel Jones gets hurt and Anthony Richardson has to play for an extended period of time and he plays extremely well, there's no reason to think that Anthony Richardson is going to be anything but a flamed out quarterback. And it's unfortunate because I think I put this on Twitter, there is, I think, institutional blame to go around for the failure of Anthony Richardson. Some of it, most of it, probably, let's call it that, is on the Colts. I don't know that they really set him up to succeed, right? But also he couldn't stay healthy, and that's not necessarily anybody's fault. But Anthony Richardson did not apparently do a great job of controlling the controllables. And so when I hear things about Cam Ward, right, number 1 pick this year, and he's at Tennessee, and he's coming in the building at 5 a.m. every day, he's the cliche, one of the first in, one of the last to leave, la, la, la. And he's putting in as much time as he needs to in order to understand the offense. His teammates are gravitating toward him. And you have all these things who needed to teach Cam Ward that, right? That's something that he's gone now from 0-star recruit to day 1 starter in the NFL after being a number 1 overall pick. You look at Anthony Richardson, and this is somebody that was benched in the middle of his 2nd year because his study habits weren't good enough, right? And I read something in The Athletic, and I wish I could remember who wrote it. At this point, I don't. But it was basically that Sam Ehlinger, who is a 3rd-string quarterback who was in either his 2nd year or when this basically had to tell Anthony Richardson that he needed some type of book. And he had to read something in order to increase his study habits and make his study habits better. So when you're having to have the third string quarterback who like got beat to hell in his rookie year when Frank Reich was about to like has to tell you like you need to study better, and like that's not something that you know. I mean, part of it is he's young. You know, he hasn't had a chance to mature. He hasn't played very much. I mean, going back to his time at Florida, barely had any starts. Then he gets to the NFL and he gets hurt and it's this and it's that. Like, it's an institutional failure at all levels. But like, I don't know where you go from here with an Anthony Richardson because he obviously needs to change the scenery. But if you're any team, why would you want that guy? I mean, like he's just a ball of clay in some ways. And I kind of hate to say this because it kind of gives credence to the earlier comment. But like, is Anthony Richardson what Bill Polian thought Lamar Jackson was? I don't know. I mean, but he's at least much closer to that than Lamar Jackson ever was.
Well, that's a loaded question. That's a real loaded question. You know, it's funny on Lamar. I cannot remember the college. No, it was an NFL pro. Actually, you know who it was? I think it was Pat Kerwin on SiriusXM NFL, and he was talking about the scout of Lamar Jackson that Lamar didn't run that much at Louisville, and he was a more polished passer. And I was like, God dang, that's a different narrative than I remember hearing coming out into the draft when Bill Polian kind of fell for that wide receiver question. And remember that too. Bill Polian was fed that question about wide receiver, and I think he was a little thrown off, and now it's turned into this whole thing. Here's the problem with Anthony Richardson. Like, could Lamar Jackson be a wide receiver? Maybe. I don't think Anthony Richardson has another position because right now, stop. Don't even say this one. He ain't a tight end. Tight end is so much harder in the transition than anyone like even can imagine.
You're right.
No,
you're right.
He needs to go somewhere. I mean, sort of the Trey Lance path where he bounces around a little bit. I think Trey Lance is in a good spot. I think Trey Lance has looked good in LA with the Chargers. I think he still has to work on. I've seen more than a few shots to the end zone where it's like zoom, line drive, like just a little air underneath it. But I think he's looked good. He was not ready to be the number 4 pick in the draft. The Colts, no. You're right. He should not be getting most of the blame. He was overdrafted, and that's on the organization.
100% overdrafted and underdeveloped. And so like, that's where I look at the position coach, right? Why wasn't the quarterback's coach like in his ear being like, hey man, these are the things that you need to do to be a pro. And if he was, and Richardson still didn't do it, then like that speaks to a bigger issue, I guess. But I just feel like if you are going to draft a guy that high, and even Chris Ballard has admitted this year that, Anthony Richardson was drowning. That's Chris Ballard's word, not mine. Drowning when Anthony Richardson first started in the National Football League. And, they wanted him to play because he needed to get experience. But also, like, I don't know. Sometimes it's better if you have a project quarterback to sit him and make sure that he can actually learn. But that's the thing. Like, if you are drafted number 4 overall, right? And again, we have the 5th-year option thing for a reason. Like, there is an expectation that at some point you're going to be ready to play. And going into year 3 is when you have to be ready to play. You have to be ready to make the jump between, all right, yeah, I think you can be a starter maybe, to, hey, this guy's a bona fide pro, right? And he's not there. And you knew that last year watching him play when he couldn't complete even 48% of his passes. I saw a crazy stat too. One of my buddies sent me this. If you take away passes behind the line of scrimmage, Anthony Richardson's completion percentage last year was 36%. It's not playable. So if that's the stuff you're dealing with, then yes, overdrafted, underdeveloped, can't perform to the level and the standard needed to operate as an NFL quarterback. And we watched him miss a blitz protection earlier in this summer, like 2 weeks ago, right? And then he ended up dislocating his pinky because he didn't see the blitz. So like all of those things, I understand why they go with Daniel Jones over Anthony Richardson, but it's still like, I think the situation sucks. Like, I don't think the situation is particularly fair, but this is a results-based business. And again, if you are a quarterback who was drafted at number 4 overall and you can't perform to the level of being a starter going into year 3, part of that's on you.